PhD student. Right, so like this was my dissertation work. Not this case study, but a bunch of other ones. I got really fortunate and just kind of was presented with an opportunity to think about this stuff in cool ways, and then just kept doing it. And my wonderful dissertation director said, you can't do a case study of one person for a dissertation, you have to do 3. So then I had to like do it. And now I'm still doing it, like I can't stop. Here's my sense. Almost every one of those case studies involves some sort of writing that like is kind of not associated readily with school, right? And my sense is like our students are dying for us to ask them about it. And just put the spotlight on it for a little bit, so that rather than it's like how much difficulty you have with doing these critical analyses and these other things, like as soon as you ask them about like this sort of stuff, like when I found out about the fan novels, she emailed me every one and asked me for comments specifically on a couple of them. And like it took me a while to read them, and like I just had to fess up and say, look, I'm not a literary critic, and I don't actually know how to tell you how to make these any better. But like I really enjoyed them, and I had some questions I want to ask about them. Not about the production, I'm just about why does this character do this, and how does this map onto this whole Twilight series and stuff. In addition, she designed a bunch of book jackets for me. So she gets on Photoshop. There's these really cool like book jackets, like, and then like, yeah, she has this whole PowerPoint presentation about one that I think is really cool. But like this is kind of like a pattern across like all these people. My sense is that like, as students, they're just like, I'm a student, but as soon as you say, could you tell me about this thing that you do, stand-up sketch comedy in one sense, or here it's fan fiction and the word puzzles and the Minecraft and stuff, like they talk about this stuff with vigor and enthusiasm, and they don't seem to want to stop.
Yeah.
And as a researcher, that tells me a lot, but as a teacher, it's starting to tell me an awful lot about like how to tap into their enthusiasm when initially they say, I don't read anything, I don't write anything. And then when you go to the faculty lounge, not that there's actually a faculty lounge, I don't think they have.
We have one.
Right, but like when you go there and you hear things like, my students don't read, my students don't write. Like I've got these powerful people who just want to complicate those narratives in some cool ways. And like, I'm willing to listen to them. Right?
I think the question of are these, I mean, because we asked Kevin, are these atypical? Because we actually read a bunch of his case studies, and so we had 3 different students, and now we've got this 4th one, and we were like, so are these atypical writers? They just seem so diverse. And Kevin had I think first he kind of laughed because apparently he gets asked that question a lot. But I think it's really interesting to think about, well, yes, they are potentially atypical because they're interested in writing and like we're willing to be in the study, so yeah, but maybe no, right? Maybe not as much as we think they are would be a good answer. You know, I think that was your answer yesterday, actually. So I'm quoting it.
Yeah. So like, I'm willing to acknowledge that like, not every. How many students are at ISU? You guys have about 18.
22, I think.
So, I'm willing to bet that not everyone is carrying around logic puzzles in their backpack and like has written 4 fan novels and does this other stuff. But I'm willing to bet that they do something, right? This is Kathy Yancey's whole point about, especially with the development of Web 2.0 technologies, writing is just everywhere. And in fact, this kind of thing, this phenomenon has caused Deborah Brandt to write some cool pieces about how we've shifted as a culture from like where reading is the thing that most people do to like writing, right? So this is a recent thing. But then also, like, I don't know how atypical or not they are, but like, you don't know until you ask. You know, so like, 10 years from now, invite me back, right? And hopefully some other people will take up some of these kind of tracings too. And then we can talk about like, do you see these only here? Do you see them everywhere? But I'm starting to think that like with Reef and Bawarshi doing this kind of work, and with a lot of longitudinal studies of literate development going on across institutions, you're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot more of this.
What I think is really interesting, and I just want to point this out to those of you working with the writing program in any way, shape, or form, is that what we might want to do actually is do one of our experimental teaching groups where we actually try to get students to do this kind of either autoethnographic research of their own practices or researching each other, and then actually collect that data as maybe not as robust as these longitudinal things that you're doing that last very many years, but actually we could gather some really interesting data having students do that kind of stuff that we could then bring back into the writing program as, so here are a lot of literate practices that when the new students come in and they're like, texting isn't writing. You know, like when they get into that, I don't ever write. Like you would have a bunch of examples to show them that would actually like spark that conversation. So if we had even say 10 teachers who were like, I am going to do one of my major assignments where I ask students to do this some version of this kind of research, like that would give us a ton of data to then spark that thing where when the students don't want to think that way, they'd have some sort of example in front of them to just, because that we were talking about Jody, like that is what she does with her students, right? Because over the years she's done it so many times that now when every new class comes in, she's like, so this is what this stuff kind of looks like. No, not an example for you to follow, but like a thing that kind of is generative in that it makes you notice things that you maybe hadn't noticed before. But when we ask them to do that from scratch with just like our examples in front of us, they have a tendency to be like, well, you're an English person, so of course you write, I don't write. And so that just sparked that idea for me. I think that would be something for us to maybe take on in the fall that could be really cool.
Joyce and I have a friend that works at University of Central Florida. Her name's Elizabeth Wardle. So Elizabeth is doing a lot of what you're doing here at UCF, right? Elizabeth and I talk a good deal, and she had some of her first-year comp students, I think, read a piece I wrote about fan fiction. It was published in Research, the Kate piece. Right?
Some of our students have read it here too.
And so, like,
actually.
she had a master's student who read that and did her master's thesis on fan fiction and how it does. And then she had a couple of freshman comp students who wrote these cool essays, and they would send them to me, and I would comment on them and send them back. I didn't grade them, but like, really, it's almost like, I don't know if she had them read the whole pieces or she just excerpted stuff and took all the theoretical stuff that RTE kind of like maybe put in there. But like the stories were generative enough that like it got even for first-year comp students to say, let's just at least ask questions of one another about like what are these kind of things and where do they go? And then they would write up these very astute analyses.
So also, while we're here in the meeting in front of the entire population, I'm just going to extend the invitation for you to think about doing some of the research you do and writing an article for our Grassroots Writing Research Journal, where you do that, where you excerpt the stories and try to write it for 101 students.
So this afternoon, right, I'm over here trying to write a CEAS proposal, and Joyce is having this wonderful meeting at this table right here about the grassroots thing, right? And they're talking about like getting students to write these things, getting people in your community to write these things, and like all these partners. And like the whole time I'm like, Joyce, ask me. I'm sitting right here. Like you flew me 700 miles. Thank you for asking. Because like otherwise I was going to have to bring it up like on the way to the airport.
Yeah.
So Joyce like, I know this guy who does some cool stuff.
And by the way, in case you didn't know that, we do offer our authors a cash honorarium for submitting to the journal. So we could even make it worth your while. Say $50 is worth your while.
I would say take the money and buy some of those flip cameras, give them to students or teachers, and just say, go out into the world and make maps of literary activity and see if you can capture some glimpses of it, and then let's see if you can start to represent these things in some really cool ways.
Okay, I want to mention to everybody that it's already, can you believe it, 8:30, and I'm not even sleepy anymore. It could be the coffee, but it might have been the exciting talk. But I thought what I would do is, because we still have snacks out there for everybody to eat, and so I thought maybe we'll adjourn to that room, but Kevin will still be here, and if you have other questions you want to ask, you guys should feel free to kind of keep talking. But thank you very much, Kevin, that was awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Joyce, you don't sleep, come on.
I don't want to sleep.
You don't sleep.
That's not true, I sleep.
I'm sure you do.
You say when I said you had to.
I used to just say, I sleep like everyone else, I just move really fast.
There you go.
Thank you for bringing me here. I really enjoyed it.
It was great.